Welcome to a new episode of The Brand Called You, a video and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Today, I am privileged to welcome a friend from Bahrain, a very, very senior professional and a fellow IPO member, Omar Fahoum. Omar, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Omar is the former CEO of Deloitte and Touche for the Middle East. And as I mentioned, he's a fellow IPO member. So, Omar, what would you say are three key milestones in your life or your career?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I've thought about this, and really, I would say the three ones that come to mind, top of mind, would be working in the U.S. I went to university in the U.S. I graduated there, but I continued working there, and that was in the early 80s, 1980s, and that just the work and lifestyle and the immersion that I got
Mhm.
was really a superb foundation for me in later on in my career.
Right.
But it was the whole package of and culture,
Mhm.
and because I experienced the culture in the US as a student, but it
Mhm.
was totally different experiencing it as a professional.
Okay.
The second would be in the late 80s and early 90s, I moved to the Gulf region with Deloitte. I had joined Deloitte after a while, and I moved with them. And that was a truly new experience. I was never an expat, so that was a new experience for me. I was a newlywed, and it's and in Saudi Arabia. So it's not just the Gulf region, but it's all this Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia 30 years ago is very different from Saudi Arabia
Correct.
today. But the
Correct.
exposure, the culture, and the interaction with a demographically different setup
Mhm.
where expats are uh, at least one third, if not in some cases in the region, more than two thirds of
Mhm.
the population. So that was as well as the professional exposure. And the last one I would say in terms of key milestone would be me leading the firm, and that was again 10 years after in 2001, and embracing the role
Mhm.
of being a leader of a professional services firm, along with the exposure and interaction that gave me not only in the region, but also within the global organization.
Mm.
So I've been privileged, I've been blessed, but those are the three milestones that come to mind
Fabulous.
and that have shaped me in many different ways.
Amazing. So now let's talk about your amazing innings at Deloitte and Touche. Let's start with you telling me what is the scope of work the firm does in the Middle East?
Deloitte Touche is, as it is well known, is one of the big four, and those are the largest professional services organization in the world.
Mhm.
So the scope of services started historically. So just for the benefit of viewers and listeners, started 175 years ago, and naturally started as a pure audit firm.
Mhm.
So did the other larger firms that currently exist. But as time evolved, they have morphed into something significantly more than audit firms. So the scope of work that currently is covered with those professional services, and specifically with Deloitte,
Mhm.
would be advisory work, consultancy, corporate finance, financial advisory, tax advisory, and audit, of course,
Mhm.
and risk advisory. So it has really expanded into services, and some of these services currently, 10 years ago, simply did not exist,
Correct.
and it's just keeping up with the rest of the world
Mhm.
and the demand on services.
Amazing.
Technology is a huge component of our advisory business,
Mhm.
and recently legal was added. So it really is going the whole expanse of all professional services,
Mhm.
but still such firms are still viewed as accounting firms. The reality is the audit business in all of them is varies from anywhere between less than 20% to a maximum of 1/3.
Amazing.
So these are really advisory firms that
Mm.
started as audit firms.
Amazing. So, when I was reading about you, it was fascinating to read that you grew the business 15-fold and the headcount grew from 500 to 5,000. Tell me, what were some of your key challenges?
Well, the Deloitte in the Middle East is basically one firm, but covers multiple geographies, multiple jurisdictions, multiple countries.
Correct.
And in fact, I always say
Mm.
we've been in the region in the Middle East since 1926, so 95 years. So we're older as a firm than most of the countries we operate in.
Correct.
Most of these countries did not exist in
Mm.
1926
Mm.
as independent sovereigns.
Amazing. Yeah.
We operate in 13 different countries in the region through 22 or 23 different offices.
Mhm.
So being in a multi-jurisdictional setup was a significant challenge
Okay.
because we need to adapt ourselves while at the same time delivering a consistent standard of service.
Okay.
To drive that point home, we still operate in probably the richest per capita country in the world, which is Qatar,
Mm.
and one of the poorest, which is Yemen.
Mm.
Yet we still operate as Deloitte with the same commitments, same standards. And that was a huge challenge, is how do we deliver on that promise while operating in a very different, regulatory, legal, and political environment.
Correct.
So definitely a big challenge.
Mm.
Talent was always a challenge.
Mhm.
The Middle East, as you can imagine, and Middle East is a word, descriptive or a nomenclature often used, but strictly speaking, our Middle East,
Mm.
where we operated as a business, has had its fair share, if not more than its fair share, of geopolitical uncertainties and instability. So the second was really talent.
Mhm.
And those are linked together, the political stability along with talent and talent retention. Because of our growth trajectory,
Mhm.
we just needed to hire and hire and hire. As you mentioned, we were
Mm.
500 and moved into over 5,000 over a
Correct.
period of time. Attracting talent, retaining talent was always a challenge,
Mhm.
particularly in a region like this, and keeping up with the whole developments that take place.
Mm.
And the third one would really be when I stepped into the role in 2001, we were no more than a dozen partners
Mhm.
and 500 people.
Mhm.
Um, we did have a partnership culture, a partnership ethos. Everybody knew everybody,
Mm.
whether partners, whether staff in the different in various offices. The third challenge or a significant challenge was how to manage and balance a breakneck growth trajectory, which was what we had, and
Mm.
we were growing annually at 30%, 20%,
Wow.
25%,
Mm.
along with keeping our culture, our values, and the ethos of the firm of a partnership.
Mm.
Naturally, there would have been trade-offs
Mm.
between, being a small family and effectively a much extended one. That is the trade-off, the price you pay for, I guess, growth. But they are not mutually exclusive.
Mm.
Having that partnership culture and privately held business culture along with scale
Mm.
is not necessarily mutually exclusive, but it is a challenge.
Very interesting. So, again, I've spoken to many people from accounting firms and large accounting firms, and I've often asked them this question. I'm going to ask you the same, that, accounting firms have evolved as, from accounting to consulting firms. And sometimes I see them handling the same set of clients. So is there a
Yes.
conflict between the accounting challenges and the consulting opportunities?
Without a doubt, and those challenges are hugely manifested, and I'll just take a minute
Mm-hmm.
to walk you through how they evolved and what I feel was really the trigger
Mm-hmm.
for these conflicts coming to the forefront.
Okay.
So, as I said, all those firms, the professional service firms, started as audit clients, as audit firms, and then evolved into advisory businesses. And naturally, it's easier to serve existing clients than to look for new ones. So audit clients became consulting and advisory clients, and that was fine. And there were conflicts, but they were managed through different teams, through Chinese walls, through whatever you want to call it. The reckoning came really with Enron in 2001,
Yeah.
because at the time the firm was Arthur Andersen. They were making multiples of their audit fee from Enron than they did from the consulting work. And ultimately, when Enron collapsed, that brought the whole issue of conflict and conflict management to the forefront. And different firms dealt with it separately. Some firms, many of our competitors, simply sold off their advisory business and said, we know that's a way of dealing with conflicts, only to come and rebuild them again in the following year, but in a different shape, and with a view that the conflict is manageable. Currently, as we speak, those conflicts are sometimes not allowed by regulation. So in many countries, you simply cannot provide advisory services to an audit client. And in the EU, they have capped the fees that firms can charge for advisory work vis-a-vis the audit. So it's an ongoing battle. The recent, if you'd like, very very spectacular or well-publicized audit failures globally have again brought this issue
Back
and particularly more so in the UK than the rest of Europe. And the UK regulators are trying to deal with this in a way that necessarily does not impede the ability to serve those clients, but hopefully not result in a breakup of the large professional services firm into audit service only firms. So the conflicts exist, and it's conflict management is a daily battle.
So my next question to you, Omar, is relating to technology. I know all the large firms have really taken to technology for their own operations extensively. But I was reading an article and someone was telling me that blockchain could actually replace the entire audit function. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's blockchain, is AI, and it's the advent of all the technology. I personally do not believe that the profession is at risk. I certainly believe the technology advancements that have taken place in the last 2 decades, I would say, 2.5 decades, have been a boon and have enhanced and augmented the audit process. One of the challenges that the audit firms have had in the last 20 years is the ability to attract talent because of the nature of audit, being a bit mundane, routine. The tasks are repetitive. So technology has had a massive impact in looking at those mundane, recurring, repetitive tasks and doing them faster and better than people would do. And equally, on the flip side is that our professionals, particularly the younger ones, are not stuck doing those tasks that no longer appeal, particularly to the millennials. The tasks that we would do 40 years ago, they're unlikely or unwilling to be wanting to do that. So I think it has been hugely beneficial to the audit business. The investments made by the respective firms, and here I'd go out on a limb, I think have been massive. And I would say the audit business has invested in technology way ahead of other professions. Specifically, if I want to draw comparisons, legal profession. So the global law firms, local and local ones, have not invested as much or as fast in technology as much as the consulting and audit services firms. So I would say, to the contrary, I don't believe it replaces it, but the current technology has file interrogation, contract reviews, journal entry reviews. It's inventory management. All of these tasks that used to be with people, and a lot of it now is done better, faster, and at a bigger scope. So sampling is much more extensive, and it's done, as I said, it's done much faster and much more, much
Efficient.
more accurately, actually.
I agree. So one more question for you relating to Deloitte or the advisory and accounting before I move to the next segment. I've been reading that a lot of countries in the Middle East are now introducing taxation,
Yes.
either service tax or GST or even income tax. Uh, and this is from a situation where there used to be no taxes. What, in your opinion, will this do to businesses who are not used to paying any taxes?
Well, there's this misconception globally that the Middle East region has, most of it has no taxes. That is actually not true.
Okay.
And specifically, when we talk about the Middle East, it's segmented between, let's say, the Levant, North Africa, and the Gulf countries. So, with the exception of two countries in the region, all countries have all kinds of taxes:
Oh, really? Okay.
corporate income tax, personal income tax, etc. The Gulf, on the other hand, and this is where the bigger expat communities are, as well as the largest and the third largest economies in the region, which is Saudi and United Arab Emirates, do not have a personal income tax. And that is really where the misconception arises. But there is corporate taxation
Okay.
in almost all those countries, and certainly in the larger ones. The change has recently been the introduction of indirect tax. So we're looking now at VAT, sales and goods tax, that has been rolled out in most countries. Some of it really goes back to more than 20 years ago, but in the Gulf region specifically, and this is where my business focus was, that is new. So Saudi Arabia introduced it, Bahrain introduced it, United Arab Emirates introduced it, and just as this month, as of recently as this month, Oman introduced it, albeit at varying rates. But indirect tax, transfer pricing has been also regulated. So it's indirect taxes in all its forms that have been there, that have been introduced. But corporate income tax has been around for a long time, and it's a significant part of our business.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to now move on, and I'm going to ask you a few questions for you, which are for you personally. Omar, you've built an amazing business over the last 2 decades. Um, and from a situation where you said with 500 people and 13, 14 partners, where you knew everybody, now it was such a big business. My question was, what is your leadership style?
And thank you for asking. And you'll know as I go on, I shy away from having the word style, because maybe that is an overused descriptive, but it's necessary because I think it's helpful to articulate it in somehow. But I would say, if I want to characterize myself and how I've conducted myself as a leader of that business, I would say the style would be open, respectful, inclusive, and resolute.
Okay.
I've seen counterparts. I've seen people that I reported to globally, and I've learned a lot from them. But I wanted to really not necessarily just have my own style, but really have a style that is more reflective of my own character. And certainly, I would say humility is a word that comes to mind. At the end of the day, we are in a people's business. We're all, even outside the business, we're all human. And I just found it fundamental for me to maintain a sense of keeping it real and not letting it go to one's head that you're the CEO. It is really, it is, the CEO is first among equals in many respects, but ultimately decisions have to be made. Those reside with the CEOs, but in an open manner. And I said also resolute is, someone said a statement that always stuck in my mind, that sometimes wrong, but never in doubt. So
Very well said.
definitely I got things wrong in many cases, but it does not help to keep second guessing. Once a decision is made, you just move on. You learn, you do post-mortems, but you move on. But really, it is the respectfulness and the inclusiveness where people feel they're part of that journey and they're part of the outcomes, rather than it's a one person that attribution.
So I've got now time for two more questions. My next question to you, Omar, is that from where you stand today, as you look back at life, and I'm sure you'll be doing some fun things ahead as well, what does success mean to Omar?
Well, success is only for me is only meaningful if it's shared.
Correct.
So it is this is it gets very lonely if you feel successful at the expense of others, or if the others don't feel as successful. So really, it is it is a reflection of the collaboration, of the teamwork, regardless of who was leading or who was not leading. So success to me is being shared. That's an attribute. What does it mean? I think is just genuinely making impacts that matter in people's lives. Financial impacts, career impacts, social impacts, livelihood impacts. So in our business, and maybe many of your viewers and followers may not know this, it is a privately held business, but it is fundamentally a stewardship business.
Okay.
So I mentioned that the Middle East firm has been around for 95 years. Deloitte has been around for 175 years. And when a partner retires, he or she does not leave that particular share or units to their heirs. So yes, legally partners are the owners, but in reality they're stewards, and that is a much more appropriate description of what we do. And the whole drive behind that is you strive to leave the firm in better shape than when you walked into it. That's the measure of success in a business like ours, because that is the measure of success of a steward. He or
Very well
she
said.
who genuinely has the well-being of others in mind. And how to measure that is the business and the livelihoods of the people impacted and the stakeholders in that business.
So, Omar, my last question to you, and this is for the thousands of young people who will listen to all your words of wisdom. What would your advice be to a young individual who is looking to start off on their journey in the advisory accounting world?
Yeah. And we did at the beginning of this offline, we had a quick discussion about today's young people,
Yeah.
and how things are different from previous generations. So my advice would be really to be anticipatory, curious, and bold, because the world is changing. And in fact, I mentioned many of the jobs that exist today that literally worldwide did not exist 5 and 10 years ago.
Correct.
So I would genuinely say is, definitely stick to your values, but definitely be bold, anticipatory about where the world is going, what drives you, what motivates you, and maintain curiosity, because that just helps you avoid the mundane.
Very well said. Omar, thank you so much. It's been such
Thank
a pleasure
you.
speaking to you. I just loved
Likewise.
the way you redefined, for me, I had not heard this before, a partner as a steward. I think that is
Thank
quite
you.
amazing. That's quite amazing. Thank you very much. And I look forward to staying in touch and
Likewise. Thank you
everything
very
that you're going to
much.
be doing now. Thank you
Thank you
again.
very much. Thank you, Ash. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.